All right, welcome back. I hope you all had a great week. Today we're continuing our BCBA exam review, where we're going through a full BCBA exam, question by question, and breaking down each question, how I think you should think about it when you take your actual exam. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. If you're looking for all of our study materials, please check out bcbastudy.com. We offer a full practice exam, a 5th edition task list study guide, and our combo pack, which comes with everything. Our second practice exam is on the way. If you buy the practice exam or the combo pack now, you will get that at no cost when it is released in a few weeks. So be sure to check those out. Any questions or comments, please let me know. I'm happy to help. Email me, leave a comment below, whatever's better for you. Other than that, just keep working hard, keep studying hard. Let's get to our questions. Okay, 121. Every Monday, you attend night class. Leaving the class is reinforcing for you, and you eagerly anticipate the end of class. Sometimes the class lets out after the professor goes through 25 slides in a PowerPoint, and sometimes class lets out after 2 hours. But there's no indication of what will occur on any given night. What type of schedule does this represent? All right, so we're looking at a compound reinforcement schedule question. Let's first identify what schedules are we working with, right? Compound schedules, we're typically dealing with multiple types of basic reinforcement schedules. In this case, we have 25 slides in a PowerPoint, which would be an FR 25, or 2 hours, which would be an FI 2, okay? So one of these schedules is going to provide you reinforcement. Neither can occur together, so it's only going to be one schedule at a time, and it appears randomly. They rotate randomly. Additionally, there's no SD. So if we have a compound schedule of reinforcement where 2 or more schedules are alternating, one is only occurring at a time, and there's no SD, what are we looking at? We're looking at multiple, mixed, tandem, or concurrent. Well, we know tandem is what? Tandem is when you have to complete 2 or more schedules in a sequence with no SD. These aren't sequenced, right? They're alternating randomly, so tandem is out. Concurrent, you get to pick your schedule. This is associated with matching law, where 2 or more schedules are operating and you're picking which schedule you're going with. You're not picking schedules here. Again, they're rotating, they're random. So that leaves us with multiple and mixed. Now, multiple and mixed, they share all the characteristics except for one, which is what? Well, one is signaled by an SD and one isn't. And that's the key here, because here there's no indication, no SD, which reinforcement schedule you'll be using. We know multiple has an SD that signals which reinforcement schedule is available. Mixed doesn't. Therefore, mixed is going to be our answer. This is how you need to think about compound schedules. They want to know, okay, does an SD signal it or not? How many schedules are occurring? Does it happen in sequence? Right? Those are 7 of these compound schedules, okay? 6 of them, right, come in pairs, right? Multiple and mixed, okay? Concurrent is the only one that doesn't. Concurrent is the matching law. So you need to know the specifics of your reinforcement schedules in order to answer these questions, because they're going to get very specific about it, and they want to know the ins and outs of each schedule. In this case, we have 2 or more schedules alternating, okay? One is present at a time, mostly at random, and there's no SD. That is a mixed schedule of reinforcement. 122, the target behavior for your 20-year-old client is time spent on the internet. You ask your behavior technician who works at the group home to record from the time your client opens the internet browser until the time the client closes the internet browser. What type of data did you ask the technician to take? All right, very straightforward measurement question. Your target behavior is time spent on the internet. You ask your technician to record from the time they get on the internet to the time they get off the internet. So what are we recording? Well, we're recording the total time of this one response, this time spent on the internet. What type of data are we taking if we're recording how long a response occurs? Are we taking inter-response time? A. Inter-response time is time in between behaviors. So if we were to track how long passed between when your client got on the internet, that would be inter-response time. but that's not what we're looking at. We're looking at just singular responses of being on the internet and how long they spend on the internet at any given time. So enter response time is not it. What about B, latency? Well, that's time between the SD and the start of the response. We're not sure what the SD for getting on the internet is, okay? So we're not recording that. We're recording the actual time spent on the internet, okay? The actual total time of that response. Rate, are we tracking, okay, how many times the client gets on the internet? Are we counting that? No, we're tracking total time spent on the internet. So again, rate is not going to be our best answer because rate is associated with frequency, which is a count. We're not counting how many times he gets on the internet. We're tracking how long. So that leaves us with D, duration. How long do they spend on the internet, okay, from the beginning to the end of that response? Pretty straightforward measurement question, okay? Nothing too complicated here. When you get these easier type questions, don't overthink it, right? Trust your instinct, trust your preparation, trust your knowledge, pick the best answer, and move on. 123, which of the following areas of behavior analysis focuses on basic research that adds to the body of knowledge about behavior? Okay, so these questions can be a little tricky because we don't really talk about the different bodies too much outside of the exam. So for a lot of people, it's the first time you're actually learning about the different areas, right? Typically, as analysts, we just think about what? We think about applied behavior analysis and behavior service delivery. Applied behavior analysis is, of course, what we do, right? We take our knowledge and apply it to socially valid situations, okay? And what about behavior service delivery? Well, that's when we're actually implementing, right? Our technicians do that. Sometimes we do that. So that's what we typically think of, right? And that's not what we're talking about here, okay? When we're talking about the basic research that adds to the body of knowledge about behavior, what are we looking at? Well, we're looking at the experimental behavior analysis, right? Actually going in the lab, adding to research using contrived settings, okay? Typically animal studies, right? We're doing experiments in a controlled environment just to give us more knowledge about behavior. And that's what we're talking about here, about basic research adding to the body of knowledge about behavior. We're all familiar with applied, like we just said, that's just going to be the socially valid measures, okay? We're applying what we know to these real life situations. Behavior service delivery, we're actually implementing what we know. And then in the conceptual analysis of behavior, we're addressing these philosophical, theoretical issues in our field. So much more theoretical, really, right? We're just kind of thinking about these issues in our field. But when we're talking about basic research, okay, conducted to add to our body of knowledge, we're talking about the experimental behavior analysis. 124, our goal should be to collect data that best provides the most complete picture of a client's behavior. Which of the following measurements fully captures the client's behavior? Now, the dead giveaway in this question is fully captures. Think about our measurement systems. We have continuous, we have discontinuous, and then we have permanent product, right? Continuous measurement, what does that do? Continuous measurement captures every instance of a behavior. Discontinuous measurement doesn't. Discontinuous measurement is based on these intervals, right? Typically used in group settings or when we have less resources or when the behavior happens at a high rate. But if we want to fully capture our client's behavior, what are we going to use? We're going to use some sort of continuous measurement. That way, every instance of behavior, we're recording. So that's what we're looking for here. When you're studying and doing practice questions, try to predict the answer before you read the answer choices. It's going to get you better at the test. When you see fully captures, you should immediately think, all right, I'm looking at some sort of continuous measurement. So A, whole interval recording. Well, whole interval recording is what? It's discontinuous. So it's not going to fully capture our client's behavior, right? Whole interval, partial interval, momentary time sampling tend to overestimate or underestimate our behavior because we're not getting the full picture. So we can eliminate A and C. We can also eliminate D, which is a type of group momentary time sampling, okay? That leaves us with B. Latency is the only continuous measurement option here, It's going to be the only one that fully captures our client's behavior. 125, you provide a behavior contract to your 12-year-old client that will provide an Xbox game as a reward for successfully completing the contract. Your client's brother becomes jealous and starts to sabotage your client's attempt at completing the contract successfully. Which of the following answer choices represents the best next step for you to take? All right, so what is happening in this scenario? We have a behavior contract, okay? Typically with a behavior contract, we sign it and that's it. We don't alter that contract, okay? If we're going to alter the contract, we need to make a brand new contract, but typically we want to avoid that. Once we have that contract in place, we want to see it through. However, your client's brother is now sabotaging your client. What do you do? How do we handle this situation? A, you should start collecting data on the brother and providing treatment recommendations for his behavior. Is the brother your client? No. Are you allowed to provide treatment recommendations or behavior analytic recommendations for the brother? No, that is not our client, okay? He's part of the environment, but any recommendations we make need to be in relation to our actual client, okay? Unless your brother is signed up as a client under your caseload, we can't just provide treatment recommendations for his behavior. If we're collecting data on the brother and providing treatment for him, we're taking away time from our client. All our recommendations, all our data needs to be in relation to our client, okay? So be very careful about that. B, you should discuss the sibling's behavior with the client's parents and offer recommendations for ways to alleviate the issues. Okay, so this is better, right? Now we're just discussing the behavior with the client's parents. It's part of the environment, right? And now we can have recommendations to alleviate the issues, okay? So B is better than A, right? Because we're not focused on the brother's behavior, all right? We're focused on the bigger picture at hand that involves our client, okay? So B is better than A, right? C, ignore the sibling behavior completely and focus only on your client completing the behavior contract. Well, we can't do that. The sibling is part of the environment. So while we can't provide treatment recommendations for the sibling, okay, we can offer recommendations for ways to alleviate the issue of the sibling disrupting our client, okay? And then D, reward the client even if they don't complete the contract since there was a disruption. No, our contract, our behavior contracts should be ironclad. We should stick to them. If we don't, we're defeating the purpose of that contract. So the best answer here is B. Discuss the sibling's behavior with the client's parents and offer recommendations for ways to alleviate the issues. We're still focused on the bigger picture at hand with our client. A is too specific, is too focused, okay, on fixing the brother's behavior, quote unquote, changing the brother's behavior, okay? He's not our client. Our client is our client. The sibling is part of the environment. So we want to offer recommendations to change the environment to help our client. So B here is our best answer. 126, your client is typically compliant and well-behaved. Behaviors typically occur only when the client is denied access to his Nintendo Switch or his iPad. Yesterday, you told your client he could only access the Switch after he completed 10 minutes of work. In response, your client started to cry. Based on this information, what is the best hypothesis regarding the function of the client's behavior? All right, pretty clear-cut question. If you know your functions, we're making a hypothesis regarding our function of the client's behavior. As a behavior analyst, you'll be doing this all the time. What are we looking at here? Well, we're looking at our initial assessment. Behaviors typically occur only when the client is denied access to the Switch or his iPad. And then yesterday you told your client he could only access the Switch after he completed 10 minutes of work. So what are we doing? We're denying access. He starts crying. Based on this information, our function is most likely what? Well, it's probably tangible. It's not automatic because this is socially mediated, right? You're involved, okay? You told your client something, so it's socially mediated. He's not trying to escape anything necessarily. He wants access, all right? And then he's getting your attention. You're talking to him. You're giving him attention. He's still crying. Our best hypothesis here is tangible. Pretty straightforward question. 127, Jose and his two lab partners conducted an experiment using a withdrawal design in which they were able to demonstrate experimental control. Jose's lab partners were ecstatic and felt like their experiment was perfect, but Jose wanted to attempt the experiment again with different participants before submitting it for publication to check for errors in data collection or intervention. What principle of science is Jose adhering to? Okay, long questions, right? However, very simple principle of science question. Okay, your principles are attitudes of science, the 6 of them, and then the 7 dimensions of behavior analysis. You need to know those backwards and forwards. Those should be gimmes on the test, right? You should never miss those questions on the exam. They should be very straightforward, very easy. What is happening in this question, right? Well, Jose wants to do what? He wants to attempt the experiment again. So he wants to replicate the experiment. Okay, so check for errors in data collection. This is just good science by Jose. What principle or attitude of science is this? Is this determinism? What does determinism say? Determinism says behavior is lawful. It happens for a reason. We're not necessarily looking at some sort of behavior here, right? We're looking at the experiment and wanting to do it again, right? He wants to replicate the experiment, which leads us to B. What principle of science is Jose adhering to? Replication, right? Experiments should be able to go through a replication process, right? That's something we're always doing. We're always testing, always trying again, just to be sure, right? We have stimulus control or a functional relation between our IV and our DV. That's what Jose is doing here. B looks like our best answer. Always read all of your answer choices just to understand why the wrong answers are wrong and the right answers are right. It's going to make you better at the exam. C, philosophical doubt. Okay. Philosophical doubt says we should always question past science in theories, right? Jose is more replicating his own experiment rather than questioning other theories and outcomes. Okay, so replication is what's occurring here. He's going to replicate, right, his experiment. And then parsimony says we always go with the simplest answer first, right? So B here is our best answer. Jose wants to replicate his experiment to check for errors in data collection or intervention. He's not necessarily doubting what they're doing, right? They like their experiment. He just wants to replicate it to be sure. 128, this type of behaviorism included verbal behavior as part of its core philosophy. So we know we have radical behaviorism and methodological behaviorism. The two big differences they want you to know between methodological and radical. First, radical acknowledges private events as behavior, okay? Second, radical behaviorism is when verbal behavior became operant through the works of Skinner. So this type of behaviorism included verbal behavior as a part of its core philosophy. Is it radical, methodological, both, or neither? Well, of course, it's radical. 129, your client finally achieved their goal of writing their name independently. However, they now refuse to use anything but a Sharpie to write. They are able to clearly write their name with a Sharpie, but cannot do it with a crayon, pen, or pencil. You now provide a different writing utensil to your client each time you work on writing their name. You are training what? Very common when we first teach our young clients different skills using one tool or stimulus. They start to just associate that skill with that one stimulus. And then as we try to change it out, it becomes an issue. And as we avoid fixing that issue, as they get older, it gets worse and worse as that behavior becomes more strengthened. In this case, we need to teach them what? It's good you can write with the Sharpie, but you need to also be able to write with the crayon, pen, or pencil. What are we training for? We're training for stimulus generalization, stimulus equivalence, response generalization, or compliance. Compliance is not one of our behavior analytic terms, so D is never going to be our answer. What about B, stimulus equivalence? Stimulus equivalence has to do with reflexivity, symmetry, matching, essentially. Not what we're dealing with here. we're dealing with some sort of generalization. We have a problem generalizing writing to other utensils. So when we're working with stimulus generalization and response generalization, we're asking ourselves, are we dealing with one response or multiple responses? If we're dealing with one response across multiple stimuli, we're dealing with stimulus generalization. If we're dealing with one stimulus, multiple responses, we're dealing with response generalization. What are we looking at here? We're looking at one response, which is writing, across multiple stimuli, Sharpie, crayon, pen, or pencil. So you're training for stimulus generalization. We need them to be able to do the response of writing across multiple stimuli. And then 130, Michelle needs to acquire a signature on a consent form from the client or client's family. Before the client is able to give consent, there are certain elements that must be present. Which of the following is not an element of consent? You just need to know these, okay? Pretty straightforward, right? There are three common elements of consent, okay, that you need to know. A, capacity. Do they have the capacity to consent, right? Are they able to give consent legally, right? Intellectually? Do they have that capacity? Okay, that's first and foremost. Voluntary. Are they voluntarily giving consent? Is anybody coercing them to give consent? Are they being bribed? Are they being told or commanded? They need to be able to do it on their own volition. What about ability to read? Does it matter if they can read? No. Okay, that has nothing to do with giving consent. As long as they have capacity, as long as it's voluntary, and as long as D, they have knowledge of what they're giving consent about, so they're not just signing away contracts they have no knowledge about, they can give consent. Their ability to read has no impact on their ability necessarily to give consent. Now, if you have signed contracts, obviously reading would play a part in that, but you should read it with them, go through it with them, make sure they have knowledge of it, okay? Make sure they understand what they're giving consent to. So before the client is able to give consent, there are certain elements that must be present. Ability to read is not one of those. All right, I hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe if you did. As always, check out our study materials at bcbastudy.com. We offer a full practice exam, a 5th edition task list study guide, and our combo pack, which comes with everything. Check all those out. Questions or comments, let me know. Work hard, study hard. I'll see you soon.